What up, fight fans? So, what a hell of a weekend we had this weekend in boxing. I don't want to go too much into detail with it. We're going to talk a little later tonight on the GYGB boxing podcast, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to call in. I'm going to put a link in the description. But just real brief, I'm going to cover the three main fights that we saw over the weekend. First off, I want to say congratulations to my cousin Andrea. I didn't actually get I thought I wasn't going to watch the fights live because I was at a wedding. And again, congratulations to my my cousin, beautiful cousin who got married. And funny enough, man, the boxing fiend in me had my man Coltrane on speed dial, or actually on the text, about to leave the actual wedding as everything was wrapping up around 10 o'clock. And I'm hitting Coltrane up, and I'm like, yo, just keep me notified of what's going on. And literally by the time I got in the door, Terrence Crawford had already gotten the knockout win over Thomas Dulorme. So I did get to see the fight, though, in its entirety afterwards. And look, man, Terrence Crawford, I think he's going to be one of the guys to look for in the years to come, man. And honestly, when you hear the term throwback fighter, I think he fits that mold very, very well, man, because in the later years, look, boxing is a sport at the very end of the day where it's a game of hitting and not being hit. And when you look back in history, man, there's fighters that definitely fit that mold, but then you look at other fighters who kind of stuck their necks out there and try to make things happen, even though the skill sets are there. And I think that's what we're seeing with Terrence Crawford, where he kind of sticks his neck out there a little bit and he gets hit with shots. But I was talking to a few people about this. He seems like a guy who kind of plays that bait game, where he kind of invites you in to make it seem like he's a bit vulnerable. And almost to his detriment sometimes, as we saw with Yorkie's Gamboa, who was a smaller guy, but, could still crack. So, we kind of saw this happen a bit in the Beltran fight, and we saw a little bit in the Dulorme fight where, Dulorme got some shots in there, but once Crawford just starts putting things together, we were starting to see a very, he's not a veteran in the big scheme of things, but, just the skills he shows, man, and the poise. I think we're going to see a lot of big things from Terrence Crawford, man. And when you look at the 140-pound division, it is stacked. The only concern I have is, again, we saw one Cold War end with Golden Boy and Top Rank, but now we're starting to see Al Heyman and his group of fighters, who, granted, has some guys at 140 there. I don't think we're going to see any of those guys matched up with, like, a Lucas Matthysse or a Terrence Crawford, which, again, is an unfortunate thing. But not to jump all over the place yet, but I was impressed with Terrence Crawford. There are some people who are saying he looks very vulnerable in the case when he gets in there with guys who have some speed and have some definitive powers, which segues into the main event on that card, which was the war, what should have been titled as Lucas Matthysse and Ruslan Provodnikov got it on, man. I think two stories came out of this fight, man, and it was really, for one, we knew how good Lucas Matthysse was, and we seen him show vulnerabilities against, like, somebody like a John Molina, who many think is not on the level of a Lucas Matthysse. And we saw him take an L to Danny Garcia, who now we've seen vulnerabilities with. So he's had his ups and downs. And this posed to be a very dangerous fight for Lucas Matthysse. And through the course of the fight, man, I think we saw how dangerous Ruslan can be, but also very one-dimensional too. And Lucas Matthysse, to me, showed the boxing skills. He showed the guy can crack, and to the credit of Ruslan, man, the guy's got a Margarito-esque type of chin, man, where, you just throwing the kitchen sink at the guy, and he doesn't move. And I don't care who you put him in there with, man. even against a guy who's more skillful than him, he's one of those guys where the X factor is so big, meaning the punching power, that you gotta keep him in that fight. And as this fight progressed, man, I was thinking if I was the Marvin, I forgot his last name, Freddie Roach's assistant, who was really the main trainer for Ruslan. I'm sitting there, you know, watching this fight, and my wife, mind you, is watching this as well, and she's like, why don't they stop this fight? Meaning for Provodnikov. And you know, a lot of us are like, well, damn, man, you got to give him the benefit of the doubt, because that X factor with Provodnikov is so huge that you got to like keep him in the fight. But then at the same time, man, it's like, how many fights can you keep Ruslan in, man, that he's gonna keep taking punishment? Because I think this is like 3 fights in a row that he's been cut, sliced up, and I think more so than any previous, even in the more previous fights, Matthysse was landing some fucking bombs on him, man, and Ruslan didn't move. And to the credit of Matthysse, man, I mean, Matthysse, to his credit, I mean, took some hellacious shots, man, and you can even see at points he had some wobbly legs, but I think Mathisse's reserve is a bit underrated, man, and I think quite arguably this is the hardest puncher he's ever faced, and he survived. And I scored at 115, 113. Harold Letterman had it a draw. I mean, you can argue it depending how you scored those swing rounds, but I think Matthysse was just more effective, showed more versatility in the fight, and I think in the end that won him the fight. But I think really, man, the fight at 140, as far as if you can't make a Heyman versus top-ranked guys, or Golden Boy versus top-ranked or Heyman guys, I think the fight right now is Crawford versus Matthysse, and I think that's a, I mean, I don't want to say pay-per-view, but I mean, that's an HBO World Championship boxing, because at this point, Crawford, I believe, is the WBO champion. Because I'm not even paying attention too much to the belts anymore, man, because it's just fucking ridiculous. But I believe he's the I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he did beat Delorme for the vacant title. Again, quote me if I'm wrong, or don't don't quote me. But I think that's the fight right now, man. And that fight that is a crazy fight at 140 pounds. So really, props to Terence Crawford and Lucas Matthysse. Really more so the Matthysse and Provodnikov fight was just a boxing fan's wet dream. But again, I applaud both of these men, and it also shows how dangerous and you know, how, you know, why this sport to me is the greatest sport in the world, where it really is a humbling sport for people who, you know, are fans and the participants, obviously. You know, kudos to both of them. I salute both Provodnikov and Matthysse. And for Provodnikov, I mean, I don't think this is going to be his last fight, obviously, but you got to think, man, how many more fights can this guy be in, with getting sliced up and looking like that, man? I personally, I think he should take some time off and just recoup. And really, I wouldn't be mad if he just took a year off. I mean, quite honestly, just really to recoup and really rethink your approach as far as you know, how you approach a fight, man. He can't sit in there and take punches like that much longer. So on to the last fight, man, that some people say it was a shocker. Not, in my opinion, it wasn't. You know, Fonfara, Chavez Jr. was a fight I honestly thought Chavez Jr. might get fucked up in, because, you know, part of my French, I think Chavez Jr., man, look, he's just honestly a guy who is in the position where he's at because of his father's name. And I'm not saying that to shit on him, but what more proof do you need? You know what I mean? Yeah, look, I'm not saying that the guy isn't tough. I'm not saying that, you know, he's not a guy that will be an exciting guy to watch for as long as things last, and depending, obviously, who he fights, man. But, you know, boxing is a very telling sport, and it is a sport where you find out a lot of truths about a person in and outside of the ring by what transpires inside of the ring. Chavez Jr., man, I've been saying this for years. He has, or I don't know if you want to say had, an incredibly an incredible uphill battle to really live upon his father's name, man. And Chavez Sr., without question, is probably the most heralded Mexican fighter in history. And I don't want to go as to say like the greatest. I mean, that's debatable, but at the same time, man, I mean, look, Chavez Jr. is like the Muhammad Ali to Mexico in a sense. But, you know, I just think, man, that it's tough to get up for a fight or to have the motivation to be a world champion like Chavez Sr. was when you were born, man. Like you were literally born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You know, where was the motivation to ever be greater than like somebody like your father or like his father, who had to go through the motions of you know, solidifying his name. But, you know, to the credit of Fonfara, though, man, I think, you know, the unfortunate side of this is that, you know, Fonfara's his performance is getting overshadowed by the fact that, you know, Chavez Jr. just isn't the guy that I think many of us were saying for years that he wasn't, you know. And like I said, the proof was in the pudding, and you could see just the overall preparation and the attitude and the commitment that he never really showed. And I was talking about this even during the Martinez fight, where, you know, that was the biggest fight of his career, the biggest money fight of his career, and he treated it like it was a second-rate fight, man. And I think from that point on, man, I really didn't have that much respect for him, because there's guys who are busting their ass and are going through the motions and are getting setbacks to the point where it's not even in their control. And meanwhile, you know, you got a guy like Chavez Jr. who is being given opportunities just because of his name, man. And I don't think any of us can deny that, whether you're a fan of the guy, whether you're a fan of Chavez Sr. and the fact that you're just a fan of his son by default. I honestly think we have seen the very best of Chavez Jr., man. I mean, you're only going to get what you put in. And that's with any industry, whether it's, you know, like, for instance, what you see behind me, man, whether it's music, film, sports, I mean, anything, any line, any profession, you're going to get in, you're going to get out what you put in. And this is the result, you know. And the fact that he was saying he thought he won the fight, and Jim Gray was like, oh, you know, I thought I won the fight. I mean, it's just, it's almost sad, man. It really is. And I really don't know what Chavez Jr. does to this point. And Paulie Malignaggi said it best. He's a 160-pounder who can't make weight. And I think that's just really the scenario right now. And, you know, can you think about him in a fight with Kovalev or even Adonis Stevenson or really anybody, even at junior middle or at super middleweight, like a fight with Froch or Ward or any of these guys, you know, and they're talking about Golovkin. Like, I don't think he poses a chance against any of these guys, man. So, like, where does he really go from here? I mean, I really don't know. From Fonfara, I mean, as far as Fonfara, I think he made a big case to get a rematch with Stevenson, because as it stands, there's not going to be no Kovalev versus Stevenson anytime soon, if ever. So I think maybe the fight at hand is going to be a Fonfara-Stevenson rematch that will be aired on Showtime. And for Chavez Jr., do I think this is the end? Of course not. You know, but what I think is they're going to, in my opinion, I think, if anything, go to 168, reevaluate things, but more than anything, man, well, I mean, yeah, just reevaluate things. And if I'm, you know, even Joe Goosen, like, or I'm sorry, not Joe Goosen. If I'm really Chavez Sr., man, I would really sit down with my son, and I know, you know, being a father myself, I can't think that he's looking at his son there, and no father wants to see their son take beatings like that, man. And look, Chavez Jr. got his fucking ass kicked. You know, pardon my French, but he got his ass kicked. And as a father myself, man, like I would never want to see my son be put in that predicament again. So like I would honestly sit down with my son and ask him, like, what are you doing as far as how serious are you taking your profession, and where do you see yourself in 5 years, man? You know, I mean, at the end of the day, like just like when we talk about the Ruslan and Matthysse fight, you don't want to sit there and take beatings like that. And though Chavez Jr. isn't a guy who's taken serious beatings like back to back to back, you know, you got to start to think like, are you going to stay at this weight? Because the punches are only going to get harder when you talk about other guys that are in the division. And Fonfara, by standard, isn't the biggest puncher in the weight division, man. So, you know, you got to think, even at 168, there's guys that might be harder punchers than him. So, again, with Chavez Jr., I think he really, really needs to reevaluate his career. I think not only his team, but I think his family really needs to have somewhat of an intervention with him as far as like, what do you want to do, man? Like, what is the next step in your profession and really your life? I mean, I really don't know, but as it stands, you know, congratulations to Fonfara. I mean, a hell of a performance from him, which again I think is getting overshadowed by the fact that Chavez Jr. just is showing what a lot of us thought was going to happen with him. And again, it's unfortunate. So it's pretty much it as for right now. We're going to talk more about it tonight on the GYGB Boxing Podcast, as well as the continuing debate for Mayweather-Pacquiao, which is 10, can you believe this, 10 days away as I'm making this video today. I already have my fight party set up. Not a huge, you know, I thought I was going to have a huge party, but I wanted to keep this very intimate because the people that are going to be there, 90% of them are hardcore fans, and I didn't want to go anywhere to see it. I mean, I got to be focused on this fight, but you know, we're going to be talking about that. I already gave my predictions. You can check on my video section. And we're going to be, I believe, giving our predictions either tonight or the following week. But I think a lot of us are on board as far as who all of us think is going to win. But tune in tonight, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, and every Monday night on GYGB Boxing Podcast. So, as I always say, subscribe, hit the links. Let me know what you thought about the fights and who you'd like to see Crawford and Matthysse fight next. I like to see them both fight one another, and let me know what you think about the whole Chavez Jr. Fiasco. So, as I always say, subscribe, hit the links, and I'll be back with you soon. Peace.